Thank you. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Dear organizers, participants, scholars, intellectuals, and knowledge seekers across the globe. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Let me start by expressing my best wishes for your health and prosperity during these challenging times, when the world is still witnessing the profound impact of COVID-19 on the political, economic, socio-cultural, and technological outlook. We at the University of Buraimi feel the obligation to bring the academic community closer to analyze the prevailing conditions and come up with solutions for a better future. These webinars aim to bridge the gap between the current and the desired situation, cover ideas that add value to the humanity, going well beyond the local, regional, and national boundaries. COVID-19 has given us the opportunity to look at things from a fresh perspective with out-of-the-box thinking. Ever since the term social distancing was coined, we have become digitally more closer to one another. Technology is being used in innovative ways to exchange our creative ideas to solve today's problems. We can make a huge difference by sharing our knowledge, because sometimes it's not the resources, but the knowledge about the resources which is scarce. These webinars will benefit from various perspectives shared on food security, health, education, economy, and technology. Hopefully, we'll come up with solutions by reflecting on the past, doing our best in the present, and being optimistic for the future. It's a matter of great satisfaction and pride that this webinar series has received overwhelming response from around the globe. The registrations dramatically grew to 1,200 just within 24 hours of the initial announcement. And now we have a participation from 27 countries, making it a truly global webinar series. Majority of the participants have rich profiles as senior professors, directors, CEOs, and we are grateful to them for their time and effort. I would like to thank the organizing team, especially Dr. Ibrahim Rashid Al Shamsi, the Acting Dean, College of Business, Dr. Shad Ahmed Khan, Chair, Staff Development, Professional Development Committee, College of Business, to conceive and implement this idea in such a short span of time. My heartfelt gratitude goes to the resource persons for adding immense value to this webinar series, namely Professor Imran Saleem, Dr. Anna Razenjran, Professor Ravinder Rena, Dr. Abdul Chowdhury, and Dr. Ogi Suharto. I welcome you all and look forward to your engaging and inspiring experience during these fruitful online sessions. Your active participation will make us even more enthusiastic in our endeavors for academic excellence. Thank you once again, and God bless you all. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, professors, Dr. Abood Al Sawafi, the Vice Chancellor of the University of Buraimi, for your kind words. Now, I will handle the mic to Professor Imran Saleem to highlight the main different topics in this program, and Dr. Shad will be the moderator for this session. Thank you.
Dr. Imran Saleem. Just a moment, sir. There are some participants waiting. Let me allow them so that they can attend your session. Just a moment. So we have other 10 or 15 participants. They were requesting me to allow them to join in. So we are, so that everybody is benefited. Now you have all the power, sir. So on behalf of organizing committee and on behalf of University of Buraimi, I welcome again one and all to this session. The resource person that we have today amongst us here, for me, I don't have to refer any document to introduce him. I present before you Professor Imran Saleem, currently the Dean of Faculty of Commerce, Aligarh Muslim University. He has been a Vice Chancellor of Singhani University in the past, and in the last 4 or 5 years, he has been very active in the global arena. It is a privilege for us to have Professor Imran Saleem today with us. He has been a Dean and Chairman of Jamia Hamdard, New Delhi as well. He has been a consultant to the IAS Academy of India. He has been a consultant to the World Bank, and he is one of the people, academician, who has published numerous papers in the top-notch journals like Springer's, Emerald, and now he is targeting for A-star journals. So without any further ado, I will hand over the session to Professor Imran Saleem. The participants here can raise their hand. They can also ask the question through the WhatsApp group. For the ease of everyone, I'll be muting them all. So Professor Imran Saleem can unmute himself and then he can start the session. And with this, I'm also going to lock the meeting so that no new participant is allowed. Thank you so much. Enjoy the session. Sir,
am I audible, Shah, now?
Yes, you are audible, sir. Very loud and clear. Thank you so much. I'm also muting myself so that I am not a disturbance to anyone. All yours, sir. Thank you so much for.
Thank you. At the outset, of course, I would like to have the privilege of thanking the Honorable Vice Chancellor of Buraimi University, the Honorable Dean, and of course, my very close friend, Prabhat Thaudam, Wafa, and Shah, for giving me this opportunity to avail the platform that there we will be discussing on certain issues which have emerged because of the given human crisis. I strongly believe that this is a crisis which doesn't have a precedence in many contexts, and we really need to see that how do we address to this, because there are certain disparities in most of the major part of my talk is more of based on logic and wisdom rather than on data. I have left the data to Google that can be searched out, and you may get many of the informations relating to COVID. What are the numbers? What is the industry flow? Whatever n number of things you can get in Google. But here we have tried to deliberate on certain arguments, certain points, certain learnings that we can have and we can deliberate upon, so that each one of us can actually contribute to this crisis, which is actually targeting the whole of the humanity, and perhaps the whole of the humanity need to respond it in a very converged way. And therefore, I think this is an important session which will be going through in the next 1.5 hours. I'll prefer to deliver the talk first, and then I will be available to address n number of questions as long as you wish. No issues. I'll just be very comfortable talking to each of the participants. I'll feel honored, in fact. So that is not an issue, but I would like to flag certain things, certain points. If you have some observations or questions, please keep on noting it. And at least from my side, I assure you that I'll try to address each of the questions, because I personally feel that this is the most learning exercise where we interact and deliberate. The first thing I would like to flag before I proceed further is my disclaimer, where that these are my personal opinions. You may or may not agree with this, but please, I earnestly request that nobody should act on certain suggestions that I might be making through this discussion. Well, before we really talk about COVID, we really need to understand some of the basic things. before getting to this crisis, I would like to take a brief synoptic view of the recent some of the crises. For instance, the most vital crisis of the previous century, that is Great Depression of 1930s. And I hope that each of the attendees must be knowing that this Great Depression of 1930s basically was an outcome of overproduction. It was an excess of supply over the demand, which has actually led to problems where gradually the stocks piled up and people were unable to, the factories were unable to push on their stocks, and ultimately they had to cut down. I would request participants to please switch off your mics. Thank you. So this Great Depression of 1930s was an outcome of excess of supply over demand, and which has ultimately led to fall in the employment levels, and thus fall in the income levels, and thus fall in the aggregate demand, and consequently further piling up the stocks, further closures, and this vicious circle continued. And this is considered to be the blackest spot on the face of humanity, because this was the time when the stores were full of goods and people were dying out of hunger. Then there is another very important crisis, very recent one, and that is the Great Depression of the Depression of 1998 and 2001. This was because, again, this was an outcome of excess supply of IT-oriented interventions. In fact, the world started feeling like that it will all be the digital world in the times to come, and there will be no concrete mortar and all those things which will be functional. So anything and everything on IT was preferred. There was heavy investment in the capacity building, but ultimately it didn't click well in time, and the balloon was burst. Again, it was an excess of supply over the demand in terms of IT interventions. Then the third one is the crisis of 2008, the most recent one, I'll say, prior to COVID-19. This was again the same thing. It was an excess of supply over demand in terms of housing in US, where actually the financial institutions felt tempted to divert their funds for really not to the credit-worthy people, and ultimately it led to fall of many of the banking institutions, Lehman, etc. So again, it was an excess of supply over demand. And then the fourth one is the recent one, COVID-19. Now here, why I flagged the earlier three ones is that the characteristic which was common there, that it was an excess of supply over demand, which has culminated into a depression and the problems. Well, this COVID-19 is a different scenario. In fact, this is a new challenge before the humanity, because in COVID-19 there was no issue of supply, though there was a marginal decline while we were just entering into this phase, but there was a marginal decline almost world over. But I'm pretty confident that it was not a crisis on the part of demand or supply side, and it was almost a sudden blocker. WHO declared it a pandemic, and the world became to a standstill. There was no demand. So this crisis, the origin of this crisis is not the culmination of the supply, rather it was the blockade of the demand in the first place. And therefore, I presume that this is a problem of different nature. Though I also see a silver lining to contain this problem, and that we will be discussing in this very discussion. Well, we need to flag here one more thing before we proceed further, and that is this Great Depression of 1930s. You will find that this has led to substantial change in the world understanding. and every country, the whole world has came to a conclusion that the world should grow together. In isolation, possibly we cannot grow. And that was the best outcome of this crisis. That was the best silver lining of this crisis, which actually initially has forced into World War II, but then the world has to realize that, okay, we have to grow together, because unless there is enough demand from the world community, we will not be able to supply enough. We will not be able to produce enough, and hence we will not be able to generate employment and income enough. And therefore, we should grow together. And this was reflected into the Bretton Woods Agreement of 1940s. Then again, so this was a structural change in the world, even in the thought process as well as physically, it has changed. But in 1998, 2001, there was an expectation that the whole world would change. The IT would change the entire process and everything possibly. And actually, at least initially at the time when the bubble burst was there, I believe, and we have experienced that there was no substantial change in the world. Though naturally this IT orientation later on contributed to a lot of changes. It's a long history and good one to understand for the industrialist. And I'm sure that each one of you must be having some understanding of this. Then came 2008, and again, it was being presumed that there will be massive changes. But in fact, nothing substantial changed. The world has kept on moving like that. Now I come to COVID-19, and I strongly believe that this has a lot of potential to make substantial changes. There are positive changes, there are negative possibilities. And therefore, we seriously need to deliberate before something wrong really happens and something, potentially is not captured. Each one of us is responsible for that, because this is a problem not to an individual, not to a nation, but to the world community as a whole. And therefore, we have to think twice. We have to understand this possibility. We have to respond to it. Now, the most vital thing here is, as I just mentioned, that it is originating from demand, because the demand has blocked. And we have come to a situation where it is like putting on a plaster on a fractured hand, where suddenly it stopped working. And therefore, we need to discuss this further. Now, before going it on this issue, I would like to flag some of the major interventions, some of the major features of the world economy, how the economic system works. And then only accordingly, we will try to discuss each one of them and would try to see that how COVID has actually affected it and how we can handle these variables. So the first one is, of course, consumption. Consumption is one of the most fundamental items through which the economic activities are initiated. Whether it is a barter system, whether it is a hunting and searching for the food, whether it is money exchange, whatever, consumption is a basic prerequisite. Consumption is the most fundamental activity of an economy, which ultimately contributes to the aggregate demand. And what the COVID has put up as a challenge is that this aggregate demand has come to a standstill in a sudden go. This was blocked in a moment's time, and industries were taken aback. They're running like anything. They're spinning the product out of their factories, but everything just came to a standstill in the COVID-19, and that is the most peculiar feature of this COVID-19 crisis. Then I believe the second thing is industry, which ultimately contributes to the aggregate supply. Then we have another factor, government fiduciary. How are we going to address this? I take each one of them independently, so I'll take it up quickly. International trade, this is another feature which has got affected. then we have a problem, an issue of debt. And we have to understand and see that how this debt is to be managed. Because it is one of the menaces that at least I feel. And then employment level. These are the 6 most fundamental. I'm not saying that there are not other factors. There are so many factors, no doubt about it. But the most fundamental features, the most fundamental forces which drive the modern economy, I believe, are these 6. And they each one of them have been heavily influenced by COVID-19. Heavily influenced. Now, let us see each one of them separately. For instance, we will take consumption in the first place, and I have tried to visualize this into 3 different segments. I hope you would appreciate that the classes, the economy can be divided into largely 3 parts. The first one is lower class, where the demand is actually normally at the subsistence level. Whatever the demand, they demand. And whether COVID or no COVID, whether depression or no depression, this is a level of demand that normally remains intact. If I'm eating food, I will call for it. If I'm going for certain health issues, I will go for it. So it is the most subsistence level, it is the most fundamental demand of the humanity, and therefore there is hardly any fluctuation. But this section doesn't have enough money to address this demand, this consumption. Now, this is a new feature. And the problem has started from here in COVID-19. In other crises as well, this was an issue. But in this particular crisis, I believe that the crisis has started from this point. That is the only difference. In other crises, it was a consequence. In this crisis, it is the igniter. It is the starting point. Then we have the middle class, where the comparatively, the demand has squeezed very substantially. And because of the salary cuts, because of some of the unemployment, because of the repatriation issues, because of things of that kind, there is a major fall in the volume of money that they hold. Very recently, I had been addressing one of my students who is a CEO in one of the big organizations in Middle East, and he said, "Sir, the remittances have reduced by around 30 to 35%, which is a substantial amount." And then the third class is the upper class, where they are making negligible demand. And they have lots of money, hordes of money. It may be a very small class in the society, but they have stopped making demands. When I'm saying they have stopped making demands, because the proportion in the family budget for the subsistence goods, for the food and the basic amenities, the proportion is very low, very insignificant, maybe 1 or 2%. In case of the lower class, this might be making 90 to 100%. And therefore, there is a negligible demand from the upper class, while they have hordes of money. And I hope that attendees would agree to my point that they are one of the vital beneficiaries from the government schemes that government is trying to launch. Countries have flooded the market, ensured the liquidity like anything. They have flooded the money, they have printed more money, they have taken loans, they have created debts, and they have circulated. So this industry, this class is the most benefiting factor from this COVID-19. And this may be reflected. As far as my wisdom goes, I strongly feel that this is one class which is not allowing the stock market to fall. Naturally, it is an instance, it is a moment where they are not being able to run the business, so where the money is going. I strongly feel that larger part of this money, this hordes of money, is being presently parked in the stock markets, because there is no economic good news across the world. So why the stocks are moving? There is no possibility of any profit in near future, and still the stocks are booming. How come? So I strongly feel that this is a thing where the money is being circulated. Okay. Then we have the industrial scenario, and we really need to understand this, because industry is one sector. We are actually not. I mean, this is one force which was working perfectly, and while working, suddenly they had to stop. There was lockdown almost in most of the countries. It was most rampant in India, most stringent. But anyway, it is almost across the world. The industry has come to a standstill. Of course, they had been supporting their manpower, but they had been laying off as well. They have reduced the salary structures very significantly, most of them. Whosoever, I mean, have been retained, many of them are working from home. So the work is being done. What I feel that industry is trying to use this as an opportunity in terms of creating efficiency in the organization. They are trying to cut the cost at the industrial level by shunning out the less efficient employees at the moment, at least by cutting the cost, by getting more technology savvy, by making a better use of IT sector, all those things. And they are doing it, they are experimenting it, I think quite successfully. They have been doing it very well. So market efficiency is one of the factors which has actually led to. We'll find that actually while we are discussing the industrial scenario, if we see it in the pre-COVID scenario, almost it was just an average. Rather, a marginal fall was there almost across the world, but it was okay. It was going on during the COVID. They are actually, as I said, that they are trying to go for efficiencies in the industry, in their respective companies, by trying different interventions. They are trying to make use of augmented reality and virtual reality. They are trying to make use of artificial intelligence. I mean, so many possibilities are being done. Now, the point is, what is likelihood in the near future, in the post-COVID scenario? And I strongly feel that in the post-COVID scenario, I often keep on giving this example, that it is a situation where it is just like having a plaster in the hand. You had a fracture, you had a broken bone of your hand, and you have got plastered. Now, what will be your feeling next day? You'll feel like that, okay, doctor will say, okay, after 1 month, we will open your plaster and you'll be fine. Your bone will be strengthened enough to take the load of your body, no issues, fine. Maybe, I mean, you'll feel okay if not 1 month, maybe 2 months, maybe 3 months, but you don't lose confidence. Nothing happens. Okay, yeah, we will get it. We'll get it done. It is okay. But when the plaster is cut, there is a huge possibility that then we find actually the bone is not jointed correctly. Then we find that the muscles that we needed in addition to the bones has been severely affected. Then we find that the joints have stopped working. Same is the situation with the industry. And I'm very sure that in the post-COVID scenario, such pains of not connecting correctly the bone, or the loss of muscles, or the loss of lubrication in the joints will be some of the pains that industry will have to face. And therefore, you see, one more point that we need to discuss here, and that is, okay, there is only one truth in the world, I believe. And that single truth, I mean, of course, I'm not talking in terms of the spirituality. Allah is there. That is the ultimate truth, I believe. Alhamdulillah. But I strongly feel that from the worldly point of view, there is only one truth, and that truth is change. But what we need to understand here, that the pace of that change is changing. For instance, if we take back the human history, it took lakhs of years for the evolution of Homo sapiens. Lakhs of years, roughly calculation 10 lakh years. So millions of years it took to bring the Homo sapiens into existence, somewhere back in 70,000 years back. But then you will find they took another thousands of years to evolve fire, to evolve wheel. And when compared to those developments, which are very significant, I'll say, given the level of knowledge they had. But now, I hope you would appreciate that the most recent ones, the developments which is taking place now, the pace is very high. Almost the industrial structure, if you take an account of the companies, the top companies which have been indexed on NASDAQ since 1896, I believe, formation of the NASDAQ, you will find that initially it was manufacturing. Then it was automobiles also, which has started taking place in the top 10. Then it was followed by trading, service sector. Now, most recent in 2020, I have made a small presentation which is available on YouTube. You can check out later on. The first I'm giving you the information and data on February 2020. The top 3 companies in terms of market capitalization are almost double of the value term of market capitalization in terms of remaining 7 companies in the top 10. And these top 3 companies altogether belong to IT sector. And this is just a changeover in the last 10 years only, almost a decade, or maybe at the most 15 years. So the point is that there is a major structural shift in the industry, and I can foresee this with full confidence that in the post-COVID industry, there will be more of the things like IT. It will be AR, VR, augmented reality and virtual reality. There will be use of big data algorithm in the long run. Genetics would be the forthcoming thing, and you cannot stop it. So there will be an absolute industrial restructuring and fast changeovers. This is what I foresee. And this has actually, COVID-19 has augmented this process of change. Then another thing is government fiduciary. And I'll start with expenditures. Why? Because it is the normal tendency of the government is to decide about the expenditures first, to be followed by the revenue, wherefrom it is to be generated. And when we come to the expenditure, the revenue expenditures, I mean, there is a tremendous pressure on the revenue expenditure because instant need is there. Government will have to spend, whether it is willing or not. Government has to create hospitals. Government has to provide the health related issues, and government has to spend like anything. Even the management of the lockdown is an uphill task, and lots of money is being spent by the government. Then capital expenditure. Many of the countries have felt tempted to reduce the capital expenditures. They have postponed their proposed projects in near future. Now, first I would like to discuss these 2 points. Let us understand one thing. When it comes to capital expenditure, I'm sure that those coming with some economic understanding would appreciate my point that capital expenditure of the government is largely a long-term expenditure. And in that case, the money reaches to the economy while the goods take time. Suppose a dam is being created. Creation of a dam takes years together, but the expenditure keep on taking place. So this money goes into buying for other industries. So In fact, indirectly, it promotes other private, smaller industries. Now, in this case, the governments are making an error to stop the capital expenditure. I strongly feel that stopping, if I take the example of India, Government of India has postponed most of the capital expenditures. There is a circular from the government that up to March 2021, we have postponed all these schemes. I don't think that it is a wise decision, because this will enable the supply, the liquidity of money to the poorest people who do not have money and they have demand. By giving money to the industrialist, you cannot create demand, because the upper class doesn't make demand. They are not making demand, enough demand. No, it is the poorer section, it is the lower middle class, which makes the unformidable number and the size of the economy. And if you cannot boost demand there, I believe that you tend to fail. Then in the post-COVID scenario, I'm sure that across the world, it is going to be a big challenge for the political leaders to justify their activities, to prove themselves very effective to their respective countries and the masses. And therefore, I strongly feel that in place of investing it judiciously and into productive channels, the governments will have a temptation for appeasing the masses. So they will be politically motivated to make many expenditures which may not be that desirable from the economic well-being point of view. Then I come to the revenue. Naturally, when there is no business, there is no profit, how would the government raise revenue? The chances are very bleak. So there will be a complete mismatch between the revenue streams and the expenditure, the forthcoming expenditures in near future. That is the big challenge before every economy to follow. Then international trade, exports and imports. Let us understand what is the position now. I think every one of you would agree that everything has come to a pocket, to a standstill. Nothing is happening actually. Nothing is happening. There is no international trade, no export, no imports, or the minimum there, if at all, mostly health oriented. Now, how long will it go? It is yet to be seen. But what is my point of emphasis is that every country will have to make and should make some diplomatic efforts to continue the international trade. Because I strongly feel that by shunning the borders is no solution. Domestic productivity is very important. But now the world is so interdependent, the countries are so interdependent, that very recently, for instance, the chloroquine which is produced, which is a medicine for malaria, is being produced by India, for which the input composition comes from China and was required in American market. So how can we think of shunning the borders? There is something that need to be addressed. We have to check out. Then second thing is, countries should look out for import inelastic demands. For instance, I'll give an example. There are smaller countries, maybe Oman as well, where import of food is maybe required. Then if I come to India, import of oil, it's a basic prerequisite, oil and gas. And we do need, in any case, what may come, if we have to keep on going naturally. So we have to check out and identify the industries where the demand is inelastic. And we should try to tap each one of those opportunities, because that's a very, very significant thing. And each of us, each of the country do have certain inelastic demands. How are we going to meet if we stop converging with each other? If we stop cooperating, we can. So that is an absolute challenge before every nation. And the world will have to understand that each of the country will have to understand that despite all the odds, despite all the problems, we have to converge and cooperate. That is the ultimate requirement. We cannot do away with that. We have to understand and help out each other. Now, another very important variable, the fifth one, is the debt. Now, this is the most vital and significant challenge before the world community. Let us see some data. Mr. Parampresh Singh, please switch off your microphone. Okay, so every country is already at the peak of debt raising history. Let us see some data. 2008, it was $84 trillion. It was said to be very high. Now 2020, we have roughly around $253 trillion across the world. Now it is a mind-boggling number. On average, per capita debt is $32,500. It's a huge sum. It's a huge sum. And who is going to bear the interest burden? Because you see, this interest burden and the repayment of the debt is the most unproductive thing taken out from your GDP. So it is a very, very serious challenge before the world, and especially given this crisis. A debt of $253 trillion, it is trillion dollars, 253. This was already a huge burden on the world economy, and given the COVID-19 crisis, many of the countries now are on the verge of default. Perhaps we have to think as a world community onto this, and we have to plan, because this is an issue. Because if the default start taking place, then possibly whole of the world economy would collapse once again, and will collapse with a higher degree, with a greater intensity, with a bigger low. So that is the issue. Then I would just like to flag a few countries, and you would see Japan, 237% of its GDP. This is percentage of GDP. So what they are producing in a year, perhaps 3 years GDP, if given directly straight away into debt, and this is minus of interest that they will be paying. So if Japan's 3 years GDP is altogether given to the debt givers, fine, then only perhaps they would become debt free. And this is the situation in one of the biggest countries of the world, the leader, the USA, which has a staggering debt of 106.7% of GDP. Now this is a very, very serious challenge, and we need to address this. We need to address this. Okay, then you see we have another player here, China, which has a debt of only 5 trillion, which is the largest economy with a population of 141, and Russia's debt is just 216 billion. Chinese debt is 54% of the GDP, while that of Russia, it is just 19%, maybe 20 you call it. So both the nations have a lot of elbow room for maneuvering their economic leverage in the post-COVID scenario. I am not trying to suggest that, I'm not making a comparison that what the countries should read out of this, what I'm flagging, but it is important. We will have to understand that US economy at the moment has comparatively less elbow in terms of generating demand, while China and Russia have a potential of even raising debts manageable debts, and creating some demand, at least to the friend countries. So that needs to be looked at, and we'll discuss this further. And the only fully functional nation, almost, people say, reports say that it is roughly 90%. So I have said the only fully functional nation is perhaps China. So while formulating the policies, we will have to understand these realities. These are the factual realities that I'm just presenting, and the rest is up to you to decide. Then another very important issue is creating employment. Now, this, I hope we all understand that employment creation is one of the most vital initiatives of the modern economic system. If people do not have employment, where from they are going to get money? The state cannot give unemployment doles to everyone. No, that cannot be done. That's not feasible. The majority, at least, has to be productive in order to make a nation grow. And therefore, we must have employment. We must generate employment, because that will ultimately create to generation of income. And once this income is created, naturally, it will contribute to the aggregate demand, and consequentially, once the demand is there, lots of economic activities will start taking place, and therefore, consequently, further employment will be created. Lots of entrepreneurial activities, investment will take place, industry will start flourishing, and therefore, people will start getting more money, more income, and all those things. Now, let us see very recently. Since people do not have money, give them some money to create demand. And I'll give you one example. There is one very learned professor, Noril Robini, from NYU University, Stern Professor of Economics. He recommends that Government of America, the USA, should at least pay $1,000 to each of the American, irrespective of their income level. The genesis is that this $1,000 will be the minimum subsistence. Maybe the rich people do not require it, but we cannot filter out, and therefore giving it to everyone. The rich people is a very small segment. Rather, it will go to the lower middle and the lower class of the economy, and therefore it will create demand. But I beg to differ here. I strongly feel, and we have an experience of this, that Great Depression, 1930s, the British government started giving doles, and no demand was generated. Reason being, because if somebody got money, he saved that amount of money, apprehending that whether he would be able to get this ever again or not. So it's a natural thing. In any one of us, if we imagine ourselves that we have lost the job, we are into crisis, or we have an apprehension that we may lose job, and if government gives 1,000, would you be able to spend that next day? No, you are not going to do that. Nobody will do that. So this will not generate demand. I'm vehemently ready to argue on this front. No way. Giving money is no solution. I strongly believe give them jobs. Even if you pay them $800, but it will give them confidence. Okay, I have got a job. So there is no question I'll be getting income again. Even if it is 800, even if it is 700. But people will have confidence. Because I simply I have this clear understanding that economies are primarily driven by confidence, not by money. If you have confidence, you'll be ready to do anything, spend anything. Taking the loan, consumer loan, is an example of preponing your purchases. And this comes only with the confidence where you don't have money. You raise money, you raise credit and buy it, because you are confident that you will be able to pay the EMI. That's no issue. So it is mainly about building up the confidence by giving them employment, not by giving them money. So any of the policymakers, any of the country which decides to keep on giving, those will not be able to really do well in the comeback. I strongly believe. Okay, then I hope we have some more time. This is a very interesting example. The first recorded financial crisis was the Roman financial crisis, where they used to produce currency in terms of silver coins, but in the Mediterranean region, the silver got low. They were not able to, and therefore they started token currency. Their economy was slow, so in order to boost the economy, they started minting token currency like anything. And this was the first reported hyperinflation in the human history, 284 AD. It led to hyperinflation and ultimately led to beginning of the fall of Roman Empire. Now, let us see this. US and many other countries, heavy printing of currencies. This is a sort of fiscal end game. Ultimately, they are printing money like anything. They are supplying it to the economy, irrespective of evaluating the possibilities that whether they would be able to contain the inflation. And once hyperinflation set in, then manufacturing stops and people, each one of the industrialists get entered into trading only, which inhibits the growth and put the country into recessionary mode. And once a recession is set in, it is very difficult to contain. So it is extremely important that the countries must think twice. That I'm not suggesting that they should not print notes. I'm not suggesting that they should not raise debts. But what I'm suggesting is that they have to plan the things meticulously. They have to understand their limitations, and they have to understand the limit of raising debt or limit of printing notes and currencies rather than going recklessly. So this is extremely important. Then I come to another factor, economic growth. That is, there are huge lot of declarations that depression is on the way. We have S&P, Fitch, Goldman Sachs, which is declaring -5% growth. Numera has said -5.2. Moody has said 0.2. Barclay had been most optimistic, saying 0% growth. So the projections are such that we can almost agree to the fact that depression is onset. Then we have certain projections as well. Oxfam projection, one of the organizations, has said that $250 trillion are required to keep the developing economies just afloat, not to grow, not to make them grow, but just keep on going. They need $250 trillion. Who is going to meet this bill? I doubt that someone can do it. The countries will have to take care of themselves. No international organization have the capacity to meet this volume of money, especially given the fact where most of the Europe, the USA, and most of the countries across the world in crisis. So who is going to contribute anybody's crisis? Perhaps nobody amongst except yourself. So that is another very important factor that we need to take into account. So the point is that recession is likely to be forthcoming. In all likelihood, I strongly believe that the countries will have to evolve their own strategies, each one of them, and will have to converge with the international community. Despite being local, despite emphasizing on the local manufacturing and other things, we have to converge as a human community across the world. We have to understand that in isolation, possibly we would not be able to address the whole world's issues. We would not be able to match up with COVID-19. We have to evolve a system where we converge and simultaneously we try to make the things grow domestically as far as possible. So that will be the enabling process. Now, I would like to flag a few more issues which have been, I have been specifically instructed by Shah Saab that I have to pitch upon to that, and that is food security. That is another issue that been given the economic scenario. Perhaps food, which is the most fundamental item. The most fundamental ingredient of the subsistence possibilities. Assuring the security of the basic. And I believe that use of governance in managing agriculture, it should not be left for the private sector alone. Whether it is a capitalist country, whether it is a socialist country, whether it is a mixed country like India, I strongly believe that especially in the post-COVID scenario, the government will have to come forward in a much big way to manage the agriculture and help the farmers. And why I'm saying this, I'll give you a very, very pertinent reason. For instance, I'm just taking an example. COVID-19 possibly across the world could not affect the agriculture producers. In case of India, the government is boasting that we had been able to produce, record a very substantial growth in the agriculture sector, claiming through different sources from 3 to 5% of GDP. Oh, fantastic. It makes a lot of sense. Well, the question is, okay, this volume of productivity has been achieved, but could the farmers get the price? I don't think, because the supply chain management was absolutely disrupted. There was the farmers could not reach to the mandis, to the places for the sales, to the places of the cities, urban society where they get good price for their produce. What they did is that either they wasted the produce or they shared amongst themselves, or they had been forced to sell it at a very, very low price. Very low price, because it doesn't have a shelf life. Oh my God. They have worked so hard, they have braved the COVID-19, they kept on working despite all the threat, and they had been successful in producing the goods, and still there is no reward to them. I think it is a very unfortunate scenario, and therefore the government must come out in a big way in terms of procuring their producers and generating a mechanism through which the farmers could be rewarded with a good price. Then technology intensive agriculture is another factor that we need to look at. Now it is, every nation is duty bound to focus on this. If not done so far, in near future, in the post-COVID era, we must get back to the tables and decide that how we are going to inculcate the input of technology for the farmers. They must learn and use into their fields. If the farmers' holdings are too fragmented, I believe that some cooperative mechanism need to be evolved, where some tractor or other machines can be bought on a community level and can be shared and used by all. That's one of the fundamental requirements. Forthcoming, and emphasis on agro-entrepreneurship. This is another point, very important, because see, in order to get a good price, in order to ensure the procurement, what we need is not just the government policy, no way. We have to evolve a system which is capable of increasing the shelf life of the agro product. I'm very confident the day you can evolve a mechanism, a system, an industry which increases the shelf life of the agri product, farmer will start getting good price for its product, because he would have the power to hold back. And this is one, actually this is This is one intervention which can be experimented at the rural level, every country, anywhere across the world, and enable the farmers to go for agripreneurship. That is to evolve small machines at maybe his own house, where he can process the agricultural produces and come out with something packed, something semi-finished, something finished, something processed. That would eventually increase the shelf life of the agricultural producers. I'm trying to finish fast. I'm sorry I have taken long. And the next one is health. I think this is also a very, very pertinent issue. The COVID-19 has exposed us like anything, and which is an inevitability to the human existence. And therefore, health is an issue that needs to be taken care of. And I'm sure that the organizers have chosen these topics very, very diligently, extremely well. Now, again, I would like to emphasize here that since the priority and importance of the sector, the government will have to see the parental role. Perhaps the government will have to evolve somewhere under PPP model, public-private partnership, where certain mechanisms need to be evolved so that healthcare becomes a priority of every society. Because if the masses are not healthy, then where from you are going to get a healthy workforce? And I'm very sure, see, that in the future, we might be needing less of manpower, but we will be in need of highly competent and very enabled manpower. So this is extremely important that we need to take care of healthcare. Then some mechanism of public health insurance should be. See, the poor segment has been exposed during this RF crisis, where they don't have enough resources to go even for fundamental checkups. This is really tragic. The government doesn't have enough resources. And the private sector, doctors, hospitals are not addressing those poor people. It's so unfortunate that they are dying, many of them, out of just negligence and lack of care. Then another very vital issue is that perhaps every country need to understand that we have COVID-19 this time. It could be COVID-21 next year or something else. Let us hope not. But there is always a possibility, and therefore preventive healthcare is very important, and that need to be, really looked upon. This is especially very important for a country like India, where we have Ayurveda and Unani medicine very well developed, and we have lots of preventive medicines, and especially in the Unani medicine, which actually try to act through immunity system only. Even the homeopathy, the basic premise is that you enable the immunity system, and the body would be able to fight back to any of the viruses or bacteria or whatever it is. So preventive healthcare, yoga, strengthening, exercises, these are the things, these are the way outs, and that need to be addressed. I think in the forthcoming days, both these issues will be addressed. And lastly, I would like to discuss another topic which is very close to my heart, and that is our education system. I'll just take a few more minutes. I understand that I'm running almost out of time because I need to address the questions as well. So education is another very, very important thing, and we have to understand one thing, even before talking about technology. I hope each of the attendees would appreciate my point of view. I'm asking you a question. Just answer to yourself. What is industry asking for? Is the industry asking for knowledge or skill? I think so far as my limited knowledge goes, industries, as far as possible, is emphasizing on creating the skill. It says that give us the ready manpower, and perhaps That is one of the reasons that why the education system, universities have started focusing more on employable students rather than knowledgeable students, the people of wisdom. But I have another observation here, and I hope and wish that you would agree, understand and agree to my point. My observation is that yes, we must produce skill-oriented people in the short run, but in the long run, since the competition of this manpower is with artificial intelligence, the competition is with augmented and virtual reality, the competition is with robots, the competition may be in near future with the genetically modified clones, and therefore the skill will not work. In the long run, we have to understand that humanity has to develop its competence, ability to learn. There may be a typist who is very good at work, but at some point he may be replaced by the virtual typing. When I speak and everything is typed by the software and it is being done. So, I mean, there may be the accuracy may be questionable. So this typist must have the ability to evolve something else for him or her. That is what I'm saying. Competence includes your knowledge, your skill, your attitude, and your meta competencies. And that is how we would be able to compete with the artificial intelligence. So this is extremely important for the education sector to understand that in near future they have to focus on skill, but simultaneously competence should not be ignored, because our competition is with machines now and machines with learning ability. So that is extremely important. And but still we have to convey this technology. Lots of technological interface, and this is a classic example, the way we are sharing our thoughts, the way I had been able to say the Honorable Vice Chancellor, I had been able to interact with the Honorable Dean, I had been working with Prabhat Howden on some of the researches, and we have very recently published an international paper, the faculty at Buraimi College. And I'm associating with all these are technological interface, and we have to really soothe in these things. Then online teaching, this is a fantastic thing. It's an experience, and this is one of the silver linings of COVID-19, I'll say, because prior to this, maybe I'm a full professor in the university, I have served as Vice Chancellor, Dean, and so many positions, but I never thought that I would be able to handle IT into education sector. Trust me that I used to think, in fact, just 2 months back, I used to think that possibly this is something at Harvard and Oxford. This is not my cup of tea. But now the world has really become flat for me. Across the world, anywhere, I'm open. Oh, lots of confidence, no issues. So I'm sure that my younger generation is going to have a much bigger enthusiasm. So that is one fantastic development. Then temptation to switch off from on campus to off campus. This is a threat that I foresee. Most of the developing countries, most of the developing economies are unfortunately likely to tap this opportunity, grab this in order to, conserve their resources, so-called monetary resources, financial resources. But I believe that this would be a disaster. Switching off, temptation to switch off from on campus to off campus. Off campus, online, it is a fantastic exposure. But then it can only be blended with the off campus thing, because that human interaction cannot be replaced, cannot be filled by this computer. I have 243 audience at the moment. And I don't have even an iota of understanding that any one of you, whether you are satisfied with my talk or not. And therefore, the enjoyment from within is lacking somewhere. That human touch is missing. And therefore, I really caution the developing world that please never ever try to switch from on campus to online. When the online things need to be gelled, I believe, with the things. So that then another point that every education entity should try to do is to make its presence felt online. And I think, as the Vice Chancellor has mentioned, I don't have idea that Honorable Vice Chancellor has said that there are audience from 27 countries. At least I know that there are people like my friend Mario from Switzerland, my friend Ashok from San Francisco. So many people are there. To the best of my belief, I'll say. Okay. So making online presence is very important. And the last point that I would like to raise is to collaborate and cooperate. We must support each other as an educational institution. We must understand that every child, whether it is your student or my student, deserves the best resources across the world. And we must facilitate. We are duty bound. Maybe if we cannot facilitate 10 interactions, then we can at least ensure one interaction and then rest of it will go online. That's a good possibility. And of course, before I close, I feel duty bound to thank Dr. Abood Al Sawafi, Honorable Vice Chancellor of Buraimi University, Oman, and I would also like to thank the Honorable Dean and Mr. Shad Ahmed Khan, Dr. Prabhat Haudam, and Ms. Wafa Alalyani. Thank you very much. Now I'm open for any questions. I would welcome, please. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir, for yet another interesting, enlightening presentation. You have covered almost all the aspects which we were anticipating today. Thank you so much. We have series of questions actually coming from all the part of the world, and many people have posted their questions here. I would like to personally invite some of the people because their question is big, and it won't be possible for me to read the question because I may lose the gist what they're asking. So first of all, I'll request Dr. Mario. Your question was long question, so it is better that you ask this question yourself. You can unmute yourself. And Dr. Mario, for other participants, has been a resource person in our previous events, and inshallah he will be a resource person in our upcoming events also. And he is a very avid freelancer, consultant, and a very proven academician. So Dr. Mario, over to you. You can unmute yourself.
Right. Thanks so much. I'd like to thank Professor Saleem for this very interesting wide perspective. There are so many points I would like to deal with from his talk that I will need at least 2 other sessions where we could enter in detail on some of the issues that he has raised. But I would like to center on one that I think is particularly important, and it is the concept of confidence. The COVID-19 actually, what it has done, it has forced governments to get into a dynamic which they were not somehow conscious of, and they got trapped into, i.e. to try to fight the pandemic. Since there was no vaccine available, led them to adopt very drastic measures such as the lockdown. The lockdown implied that practically demand was brought to a standstill, in particularly demand for household spending. And all sectors highly dependent on household spending. The only type of general spending that was taking place was that concerned with investment taking place with government related objectives aimed at fighting the coronavirus. In other words, government financing large corporations to produce, reconvert their productions into ventilators, masks, and all the kind of health-related sectors. So therefore, the question is now, okay, what will happen in a post-pandemic, in a post-COVID-19 situation? How will the government be able to reactivate the economy? Well, to reactivate the economy, it will require the government to pull out and privatize the public sector again, so that it could privatize the recovery of the economy. But the problem is that government spending was based on public debt, massive public debt, to an extent that when the government, if it pulls out, it will have to
Mr. Mario, can we have questions in part so that I would be able to, and everybody would be able to understand?
I'm finishing now. So
yes, please.
The question, my main question is, the recovery of the economy will require a selective type of planning by the government to stimulate different sectors of the economy according to how those sectors have been affected by the COVID-19, since not all sectors have been affected in the same way. So in that way, through an adequate structural planning, then recovery could actually take place. And confidence will come back as a result. Thank you.
Okay. So the point is very correct that government will have to address to multiple sectors of the economy parallelly. But as I see, I strongly believe that if really the government decides to address, they should start with the micro and the small entrepreneurs, because that is the minimum level. They can start focusing on agriculture sector. They can initiate and sponsor very small interventions, very small units. Because when it comes to big industries, for instance, if you talk about aviation industry, bailing out aviation industry is an uphill task. It will require a huge amount of funding. And still, I don't know, given the size of the money which is required, not commensurate employment will be generated. But I believe half of that amount would be enough to address to a very micro level of industries of any economy, and that would be which is labor intensive, normally labor intensive in nature, and therefore would be able to ignite the demand. What is the problem, and the focus of discussion should be here in the post-COVID scenario is augmenting demand. That is missing. And if there will be no demand forthcoming, I believe that any incentive to the industry to start the economic activities would fail. Any volume of money you give to the industry, unless demand is there, entrepreneur is not going to produce and bring it to the market, presuming that maybe it will be sold. No, in the first place, the money has to come to the hands which are capable of making demand. So that is my proposal. I hope this satisfies.
Yeah, just one last thing, very quickly.
Sure.
How do you conceive the reactions of the government in terms of the fiscal policies, the harsh fiscal policies that have to be put in place in order for governments to regain all the income necessary to repay the debt in which they incurred into. You see, this is what will kind of slow down the economic recovery.
I would just like to address this. I believe, see, the first thing is that there is an immediate crisis, right? Since we are into very intense immediate crisis, then I think most of the countries will have to raise some debts. Very recently, our government has also announced that they are going to create a huge amount of money from the market. That could be the thing. But what is important is that this money need to be used in the productive channels. Again, I emphasize on this, that if this money is used to augment the business sector, which are at the micro and the small level, which is labor intensive largely in nature, which is capable of creating jobs, then only the economy will be ignited. But given the volume of debts, yes, the repayment of the debt is a painful process and it will take time. I'll just share one instance. One of the economic powers of the world, UK, has raised the debts during the World War II, and the last installment of that debt has been paid in 2006. Imagine, roughly 60 years, 60 plus 6 decades it took for a country like UK to raise the debts and then repay. Last payment has been done in 2006. So it's a very painful process, because whatever money you are contributing for the debt payment and its interest becomes absolutely unproductive. And therefore, to meet the immediate crisis, government will have to raise debts. There is no second option, because government cannot tax. There is no money. There is no profitability to the industry. So it cannot be taxed. Government will have to ease out in terms of taxes. The only way is debt, perhaps. But that debt has to be judicially utilized so that it augments the economy, therefore start generating revenue, put the things in the right direction, and then government will start generating revenue. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much for making this session interesting. We have a few other questions also. They are very brief questions. Faiza Ahmed, her question is, third world countries can go for agriculture, but issue is preservation, transportation, ISO, and intermediary problem. Please discuss solution.
Well, I don't have a magic for every solution. But as I see, I have mentioned repeatedly in my lecture, in my talk, that what is important is creating the shelf life. And again, I think the way out is focusing on agropreneurship, where, for instance, we can, I hope anybody from India would appreciate this point, that we have a lot of village level knowledge and technology for making pickles, let us say, for making so many things. We have that capacity, we have the know-how, and many of us feel privileged if we get something of that kind from a village, but we are not being able to commercialize. Charge is one of the examples. I mean, we have so many products, and if they are being used, the same charge is being used by Amul and it is being marketed like anything. And Amul is making a huge lot of profit out of it, which otherwise used to be thrown away by the villagers. A part of it would have been consumed, otherwise thrown away. So our point is that those agropreneurial interventions is the way of generating employment, is the way of at least minimizing the migration to the urban societies, is a way to develop the village economies. I hope this satisfies. Yes, please.
Then we have another question from Anuradha Raheja, and this is a question which I believe most of us will share, that what effect would off-campus education will have on education and the students? Because we see that the off-campus education is going to continue even after most the countries get back into normalcy. So how we are going to deal with that?
I'll say that in the first place, this online or off campus, whatever you call it, is a thing which has facilitated learning to me. So it is one set of learning, I believe, which has been created. When it comes to knowledge, yes, I believe this is a fantastic possibility. When it comes to sharing of wisdom across the world, it's a fantastic opportunity. In last 2 months, I had been able to listen to fantastic resource persons from across the world, from US, from MIT, from so many MIT institution, Harvard, Syed Business School, Oxford, from Buraimi University itself, Indonesia, Middle East, so many countries, and I personally had been able to have so much of exposure with these people. It was a fantastic learning, but then simultaneously I'm missing the human touch of my students. I'm missing that feel, and therefore I hope that blending of on campus and off campus is the way, is the right thing. I'll just mention, Tushar, just one more minute, please, just one more minute. I appreciate there are institutions like Buraimi University which has provided laptops to its students, but I'm pretty sure even the Vice Chancellor would have been missing, Honorable Vice Chancellor would have been missing the absence of the students, or rather presence of the students would have been missed. So these are the things. I have heard so many good things about your university, Shad, but I mean, still, I mean, the word has to go on. Yes, please.
Definitely. It is also to encourage that it is the university management of University of Buraimi which is promoting blended learning. And I had been listening
so much about your university and the Honorable Vice Chancellor. That is why I was so keen to meet and address your webinar.
Just in the morning, we had a session on blended learning, in which we attended the session and we had a thorough discussion. Today, we started with another webinar in which we are participating as a participant. So I'm one of the nominees from university, and I'm thankful to the Dean and the Vice Chancellor for nominating me. And we are actually exploring on blended learning, and there also we discussed and we found that the face-to-face interaction with the students, it cannot be ignored.
Yes, of course. It cannot. This is no replacement. Yes.
It has to be a blend of the two. Anyway, now there are some people who are talking about techno stress. They are saying that now the people, especially those people who are not that techno savvy, they are suffering from a new kind of stress, and that is techno stress, because they are not able to cope up. Luckily, we have people like you. We have, I can see Madam Kawaljit, I can see Professor Arshad. We have Professor Paramjit and Dr. Mari also. So we have some people who have adjusted themselves with the modern technology, but still there are some for them who this has become another point of stress now.
Let me share one secret with everyone that I almost have lost half of my hairs during last 2 months. So stress is there, but I'm sure that it is a good opportunity as well. It's not just about, see, the point is that unless you stress out yourself, you are not going to learn new things. Whenever there is a new opening, if you take it as an opportunity, then it leads to learning. It leads to self-actualization. Self-actualization cannot take place unless there is a stress. The stress to certain level is a fantastic thing and one of the most desirable thing, and the leadership should put on some stress on everyone. Yes, over-stressing could be harmful, and therefore I think that this is just a crisis hour. I think each one of us is under stress, one type or the other. But this is a temporary phase. I hope and wish that inshallah it would pass and there won't be an issue.
Definitely. I feel for stress we have Professor Arshad, who is an expert on psychosocial phenomenon. Dr. Arshad is head of College of Social Sciences from University of Agra. If you have any point to suggest here, Professor Arshad, it will be really an honor to hear from you.
Yes, Dr. Saad, thank you so much. Generally, we are talking about that, because of the pandemic, there is going to have a change in the world social order. I would like to know if we are looking forward to have a change in the economic order of the world.
Definitely. So I feel that we had a thorough discussion on the economic order, and we have Professor Ravindra Nanda. He is also online, I can see. He is going to be a resource person for us in upcoming days. And I believe that he will be talking thoroughly in terms of the economic order. But point here to note at this point of time is that don't we think that we need to change the way we look into the economy? Because if you see the economy, we are always comparing economy in terms of GDP, then the national incomes. Tomorrow, Dr. Anna is also online with us. She is here today. Many of the professors and prominent economists, they are talking about gross national happiness. They say there is a serious need to change the way we look into an economy, and we have to change the index of the economy. And so I believe, Professor Arshad, tomorrow and day after, we need to be tuned up with these two resource persons. I don't want to spoil by revealing what they're going to speak about, but what exactly is going to be the shape of educators now? Because being an educator now, we are having a tough time because we are now available, we are on the radars of the student 24/7. And personally, what I feel is that even we don't have weekends now. So that portion, which was essential for the work-life balance of ours, is getting lost. And that is one of the questions which Dr. Salman Shamsi is asking, that what is going to be the effect of off-campus education on the educators of tomorrow?
When it comes to impact on educators, this is likely to be positive, as long as I believe if there is a proper blending of offline and online. This is going to help us. For instance, I'll just take an example that last days I had been searching on platforms like ADX and this EduNext and so many platforms, and I found that my university is missing there. So as an educator, I decided that next 2 months I'm going to put my university emblem to be noticed here. I will develop a program, and I'm sure that this type of developments I'm the dean of my commerce faculty, and we are our honorable vice chancellor, under his strong academic leadership, we have decided to establish a studio, and the work is in progress. I hope in a month's time it will be ready, and we will start producing appropriate quality input to be made available onto different platforms, including even YouTube. I have most of the online classes that I have taken in this COVID scenario. I have uploaded them on the YouTube because there are parts in India, there are issues of connectivity. So I have made it available time. That's the convenience of the student. So as an educator, I am being able to evolve different strategies and to make it more effective as far as possible. So I think this is an enabling process, whether it is offline and online. But a complete blending is the way out. It's not one is not a substitute of the other.
True. So we have another question. With the crisis looming, it can be said that the developing countries would be pushed further towards capitalism. This is the question raised by Ms. Fawzia Faridi.
Well, I believe that the very capitalism is under question, because capitalism boasts under different platforms. It boasts to be able to address all these stakeholders. And I believe this crisis, employees have been shunned out like anything. So has actually the states have been addressed? Is it really done? Whether the true capitalism has been able to address the economic needs? Are we being able to meet the social needs? I doubt. I have strong apprehensions. I think that in the times to come, perhaps the government role might increase considerably and we just cannot depend on the invisible hands of capitalism. I think there has to be, we have to nurture a system, we have to evolve a system where more focus is given on public-private partnership rather than pure capitalism. That is how I see near future.
We have one case coming from Bhutan, and it is Mr. Sange Tenzing, and he's sharing the case of Bhutan. He says Bhutan also paid entertainment centers, all the entertainment center, tourist guides, taxi drivers, with multrum 8,000 to 12,000. This gift benefited individuals maintaining their daily purchasing power. However, Bhutan's government resources were shrinking. And do you think that these type of acts are a answer to the COVID call?
I'm sorry, I didn't get the question.
Actually, he's talking about the universal basic income. He says that the government of Bhutan has distributed 8,000 to 12,000 to the entertainment sectors, to tourist guides, bus, and everyone. And with this, the resources of the government has shrunk. And is this going to be an answer to this call of COVID?
Well, I particularly mentioned this, that it is not the amount which is going to really address the issues. It is the job. It is the work. Because when you work, then you come back satisfied. When you deliver, you come back satisfied. And you have a hope, okay, maybe next month I'll get my salary. Getting those is not a guarantee. That ultimately, that has a possibility of developing a, we call it in economics, a begging syndrome, where people start waiting for the government help rather than working. So maybe that for the time being it could be a help, but ultimately the long-term solution only lies in your government's ability to create jobs for these people.
True. So don't you think somewhere the heavy responsibility lies on the shoulders of the government in this period, or the private people are going to take care of it?
I think, see, it is we people who put them into a position of ruling the things. Why not to hold the responsibility as well? Who else will do that? It is the government responsibility. And I think the government is one unit which is in a position of having enough resources to especially meet a crisis like COVID, which is a challenge to the whole humanity. It is not a question of rich or poor. It is not a question of common man or no common man. I mean, very recently, government of Delhi is doing all efforts to save every person possible, and their own one of the ministers is almost on a deathbed. So the point is, government has a bigger role. What I'm suggesting repeatedly is a participation of the government as well as the private sector under PPP model. We have to make the PPP model more effective. I strongly believe this. Perhaps capitalism has also failed. Because in this COVID crisis, we could not address almost most of the issues of any of the economies across the world. And therefore, we have to think this before just relying on the capitalism. Yes, please.
Okay, sir. So I feel that it's almost time now. Do we have a question?
Hello. Hello.
Yes, Ms. Alka Sharma.
Yes, I have a question. My question, I was fortunate enough, sir, to hear from you. Really, it was a very elaborate discourse. We are very happy to hear from you. My question is pertaining to economy. As you have said that government may be giving fiscal assistance to industry, but still industry will not pick up at the moment because of because of one or the other reason. So by what time do you expect that there would be recovery in the economy? And what should be done by the government to increase the demand? Even if there is supply, what measures government should take to increase the demand?
Okay, Alkaji, tell me one thing. Suppose you are an industrialist, okay? You have a factory and government gives you money right now. You would have been producing in the past. You would have been having stocks and everything. Will you produce more? Despite the fact that markets are not open. Customers, even if the markets are open, customers are not coming to the market.
Yeah.
So in the first place, the government will have to build up two things. Number one is the purchasing power of the consumer, especially the lowest class, because there the propensity to consume is very high and relatively propensity to save is almost negligible. So whatever money goes into the lower segment of the lower strata of the economy, it bounces back. It has a lot of velocity and therefore has a multiplier effect. First thing. Second thing is the government may start focusing on the micro and the small entrepreneurs. That is also very important, because small things, people will start getting a small job. Important thing is not in an hour of crisis, I'll not be looking for 1 lakh payment. What I'm looking at this, okay, I'm stuck up somewhere, and that will give me confidence, and then I'll start spending. I remember when I was a student, I used to save a lot of money sent by my family, but the day I got my appointment, it was the very first day when I approached my elder sister. Oh sister, give me 10,000 rupees, I have to buy things. So it was my appointment letter, not the check. But it gave me a lot of confidence. Okay, next month I'll get my salary and I'll repay, no issue. So the point is, we have to start from building up the demand sector. We have to start by building up confidence. Just money will not serve the purpose, and that confidence can only be built up by small projects, some government interventions, some government projects. For instance, I believe Manrega is a good intervention. Government should work. Government of India, I'm specifically telling. So across the world, the countries have different schemes, and that is my observation and objection to the government decision that no capital investment should be postponed at the moment. No project should be postponed. We are already under tremendous pressure. If the government start cutting the salaries, see, private sector is doing it, it's okay. But if the government start doing it, I'm pretty confident that it will have a negative cascading effect on the whole economy. I hope this satisfies you, Alkaji.
I think, sir, we are now, we have overshot our time. We have exceeded by 15 minutes now. So I feel that now even the participants have started leaving. So now let's bring this to an end of the session today. And it was really a wonderful session. And for a concluding remarks and for a vote of thanks, I would invite Dr. Ibrahim, Dean, College of Business. Dr. Ibrahim, over to you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Rashad. And on behalf of the University of Buraimi and on behalf of the Vice Chancellor, Dr. Abood Al Sawafi, would like to thank you for your valuable sessions. I'm sure that all participants are interested with your topic, and I believe that they got a lot of benefits from your sessions. Thanks again, and inshallah in the future.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ibrahim. Thank you so much, Professor Imran, and all the people who participated today. We expect the similar kind of discussion in the upcoming days also. There were some people who were asking me what is the timing for tomorrow. The timing for tomorrow is same. On all the days of the event will start at 2 p.m. of Oman. You can calculate the time based on your own local time zone. Thank you so much. Those of you who have forgotten to mark your attendance, the attendance link is in the chat box. So please copy the link and please mark your attendance. Thank you so much for coming. With this, we call it a day. Wish you all the best. Stay safe and stay healthy. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.